Chula with a nice string of fish. Well, Jistu saw Chula coming. He said, "So, Chula, where'd you get those fish?" Chula knew that old Rabbit was a trickster, was always up to no good. So he decided he was going to have some fun with him. So he said to him, "I caught him in the creek." Jistu says, "No, I don't think so. Creek is frozen. You can't get fish out of a frozen creek." Chula says, "Uh-huh. I just went down to the creek. I chopped a hole in the ice, and I put my tail down through that hole, and the fish came along and bite my tail, and when it felt heavy, I stood up, and that's where I got all these fish."
The Homeland Security Chief for Jefferson Parish. Inside his trailer, he can view aerial footage of the coastline to see where oil is coming ashore.
We're going to ask the national government, the federal government, to step in and take over this operation from BP, because BP is not putting the resources in place to stop this horrible environmental tragedy from occurring.
More than 50 miles of Louisiana's delicate shoreline have already been soiled by the massive slick, including a pelican rookery home to hundreds of birds. Their nests are perched directly above patches of crude, and some of the birds, as well as their eggs, are now stained in the ooze. Homeowners also are finding the crude oil washing up on their property.
Did you imagine the oil would come literally washing up to your doorstep here?
No.
No, I thought they'd be able to get a handle of it and stop it before now.
In Saturday's developments, President Obama announced that former Florida Senator Bob Graham, a Democrat, and former EPA Administrator William Riley, who worked for President George Herbert Walker Bush, will lead the commission looking into the spill. BP told regulators it wants to continue using a controversial chemical dispersant. EPA has ordered BP to look for less toxic alternatives, and BP says it will be at least Tuesday before engineers can shoot mud into the blown-out well at the bottom of the Gulf. A spokesman for BP says there's no snag in the preparations, but the company must get equipment in place and finish tests before the procedure can begin.
Not ask BP to simply step aside on the onshore stuff, make it an entirely government thing. Obviously BP pays for it, but why not ask them to just completely step aside on that front? And then also, can you respond to all the Katrina comparisons that people are making about this with yourself?
Well, I'll take your second question first. I'll leave it to you guys to make those comparisons and make judgments on it, because what I'm spending my time thinking about is how do we solve the problem. And when the problem is solved and people look back and do an assessment of all the various decisions that were made, I think people can make a historical judgment. And I'm confident that people are going to look back and say that this administration was on top of what was an unprecedented crisis. The problem, I don't think, is that BP is off running around doing whatever it wants and nobody's minding the store. Inevitably, in something this big, there are going to be places where things fall short. But I want everybody to understand today that our teams are authorized to direct BP in the same way that they'd be authorized to direct those same teams if they were technically being paid by the federal government. In either circumstance, we've got the authority that we need. I think it is a legitimate concern to question whether BP's interests in being fully forthcoming about the extent of the damage is aligned with the public interest. So my attitude is we have to verify whatever it is they say about the damage. This is an area, by the way, where I do think our efforts fell short.
Weeks before BP, you had called for expanded drilling. Do you now regret that decision?
I continue to believe what I said at that time, which was that domestic oil production is an important part of our overall energy mix. Where I was wrong was, in my belief, that the oil companies had their act together when it came to worst-case scenarios. Now, that wasn't based on just my blind acceptance of their statements. The oil drilling has been going on in the Gulf, including deep water, for quite some time. And the record of accidents like this, we hadn't seen before. But it just takes one for us to have a wake-up call and recognize that claims that fail-safe procedures were in place, or that blowout preventers would function properly, or that valves would switch on and shut things off, those assumptions proved to be incorrect. So my job right now is just to make sure that everybody in the Gulf understands this is what I wake up to in the morning, and this is what I go to bed at night thinking about. The spill. And it's not just me, by the way. When I woke up this morning, and I'm shaving, and Malia knocks on my bathroom door, and she peeks in her head, and she says, did you plug the hole yet, Daddy? Because I think everybody understands that when we are fouling the earth like this, it has concrete implications not just for this generation, but for future generations. In case you're wondering who's responsible, I take responsibility. It is my job to make sure that everything is done to shut this down. That doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It doesn't mean it's going to happen right away or the way I'd like it to happen. It doesn't mean that we're not going to make mistakes. But there shouldn't be any confusion here. The federal government is fully engaged, and I'm fully engaged. All right? Thank you very much, everybody.
What are you doing?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain speaking. It would appear there is a horrid smell in the cabin. I will be dropping the oxygen masks for your pleasure of fresh air. That is all.